Hi guys, for today's lesson, what we're going to be looking at is Hamlet Act 3, Scene 1. I will do a basic summary of the plot and then we will look at an analysis of the main soliloquy in the scene. The scene starts out where Claudius and Gertrude discuss Hamlet's behavior with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who say they have been unable to learn the cause of his melancholy. They tell the king and queen about Hamlet's enthusiasm for the players. Encouraged, Gertrude and Claudius agree that they will see the play that evening. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern leave, and Claudius orders Gertrude to leave as well, saying that he and Polonius intend to spy on Hamlet's confrontation with Ophelia. Gertrude exits and Polonius directs Ophelia to walk around the lobby. Polonius hears Hamlet coming and he and the king hide. Hamlet enters, speaking thoughtfully and agonizingly to himself about the question of whether to commit suicide and to end this life of pain. We will look at the soliloquy a bit later on. In mid-thought, Hamlet sees Ophelia approaching. Having received her orders from Polonius, she tells him that she wishes to return the tokens of love he has given her. Angrily, Hamlet denies having given her anything. He laments the dishonesty of beauty and claims both to have loved Ophelia once and never to have loved her at all. Bitterly commenting on the wretchedness of humankind, Hamlet urges Ophelia to enter a nunnery rather than become a breeder of sinners. He criticizes women for making men behave like monsters and for contributing to the world's dishonesty by painting their faces to appear more beautiful than they are. Working himself into a rage, Hamlet denounces Ophelia, women, and humankind in general, saying that he wishes to end all marriages. As he storms out, Ophelia mourns the noble mind that has now lapsed into apparent madness. The king and Polonius emerge from behind the tapestry. Claudius says that Hamlet's strange behavior has clearly not been caused by love for Ophelia, and that his speech does not seem like the speech of insanity. He says that he fears that melancholy sits on something dangerous in Hamlet's soul, like a bird sits on her egg, and that he fears what will happen when it hatches. Claudius declares that he will send Hamlet to England in the hope that a change of scenery might help him get over his troubles. Polonius then asks Claudius to send Hamlet to Gertrude's chamber after the play, where Polonius can hide again and watch unseen. He is hoping to learn whether Hamlet is really mad with love or if there is something else. To be or not to be is the most famous line in English literature. And what I want you to think about now as we are looking at the analysis of the soliloquy is, what does this show us about Hamlet as a character? Remember, we are trying to see his progress and his development as the character. And what we are going to see in this soliloquy is a greater understanding of the mindset of Hamlet as a character. This soliloquy is spoken by Hamlet in Act 3, Scene 1, from lines 58 to 90. Here we see that Hamlet poses the problem of whether to commit suicide, and he has a logical question of to be or not to be, which basically means to live or not to live. He then weighs the moral ramifications of living and dying. Is it nobler to suffer life passively or to actively seek to end one's suffering? He compares death to sleep and thinks of the end to suffering, pain, and uncertainty it might bring, the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. Based on this metaphor, he decides that suicide is desirable as an action and a consummation devoutly to be wished. Hamlet immediately realizes, as much as he reconfigures his metaphor of sleep, to include the possibility of dreaming. He says that the dreams that may come in the sleep of death are daunting, that they must give us pause. Hamlet then decides that the uncertainty of the afterlife is essentially what prevents all of humanity from committing suicide to end the pain of life. He outlines a long list of the miseries of experience. He answers himself again, saying no one would choose to live, except that the dread of something after death makes people submit to the suffering of their lives rather than to go to another state of existence, which might be even more miserable. The dread of the afterlife, Hamlet concludes, leads to excessive moral sensitivity that makes action impossible. It is important to note that what Hamlet is looking at here is the possibility that the afterlife might not necessarily be better than what he is experiencing at the moment. As I have said before, the soliloquy is a place where we get to understand the character a lot better. And here, what we see is that the soliloquy links us to the theme of action versus inaction. Now, that is an important theme as it runs through the entire play, especially later on when he has to think about killing Claudius or not. And here already we see that discussion happening in the place where he has to think about should he take his own life or not. Another thing for us to note is Hamlet's quality of his mind. What we see is that he is deeply passionate and that he also has a logic. The logic might not seem logical to us at the moment, but at the end of the day, it is there to indicate to us the type of character that Hamlet is. The reason he doesn't just irrationally kill his uncle is primarily because he also wouldn't irrationally take his own life. So the idea of him taking his life is definitely mirrored with the idea of him taking the life of Claudius. This scene shows us the diligence of Ophelia. Now, when I speak of diligence, I don't necessarily mean that she blindly follows what her father says. But what we need to understand is the nature of the society at the time, where Ophelia, as the girl child, would have to listen and follow firstly her father, but also secondly Claudius. So when it comes to Ophelia, in a sense, she is steered or guided not necessarily just by Polonius, but also by the society and what society expects from a girl. When we look at Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, we note firstly that they are very good friends with Hamlet. However, during this scene, we can see again that they are not necessarily doing what your typical friend would do. But again, similarly to like Ophelia, they are in relation to the king. And because Claudius is the king, they are expected to obey any commands that he gives them. And this, I think, is the primary reason for why they are willing to spy on Hamlet and willing to go behind his back and report back to the king. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, we also need to see that they are essentially a bit of comic relief in the play. And why is this important? Because it is almost as if whenever they enter onto the stage, they are seen as a breathing space. And I want you to also understand that in relation to how they interact with other characters on the stage, as well as how they are in relation to Claudius and Hamlet's saga. This scene shows us the two main fathers in the play, Claudius and Polonius. And what we see from the two of them is that they both have examples of manipulation. So firstly, in relation to Claudius, Claudius is willing to manipulate everybody in this play in order to remain as a guiltless king. He is obviously here specifically willing to use Ophelia and Polonius so as to get into the mind of Hamlet. He is also seen to be using Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to also get into the mind of Hamlet. And the reason that he wants to do this is to find out whether Hamlet has any idea that he has killed old King Hamlet. And that is why we see clearly that he is willing to send Hamlet away so that nobody else is willing to understand or get to the bottom of what actually happened to the king. When it comes to Polonius, Polonius is very manipulative. However, he is also seen to be protecting his reputation. Not to the extent, obviously, of Claudius, but remember, he wants his children to behave in a specific way so that it makes him look good. And this scene is clearly where we can see that as an example, because he wants to get to the bottom of the Hamlet and Ophelia issue, so that if there is something untoward happening with the two of them, he is able to intervene and then also ensure that Ophelia's reputation still looks good, and in turn, his reputation will still look good. Thank you for joining me for this lesson. I hope that you will like and subscribe down below so that you can stay up to date as to the next lesson that will be posted. Thanks.